The massive crystalline doors of the Galactic Council chamber split open with a sound like breaking thunder. Ambassador James Mitchell walked through them into a space so vast that Earth's largest stadiums would have seemed like closets in comparison. Above him, floating platforms held representatives from hundreds of alien species, their forms ranging from graceful energy beings to chittering insectoid creatures the size of small buildings. Each platform glowed with its own light, creating a constellation of alien civilizations stretching up into darkness. Mitchell's footsteps echoed across the polished floor as he approached the center circle. Around him, translator nodes hummed with the impossible task of converting thousands of alien languages into comprehensible speech. The sound was like standing inside a mechanical beehive, overwhelming and alien. At the highest point of the chamber, 12 massive thrones held the Council of Judges. Their occupants were beings of such age and power that several smaller species bowed their heads in fear just looking at them. Premier Krath, a crystalline entity whose body refracted light into painful rainbows, leaned forward to examine the human representative. Species designation human, from the planetary system Sol 3, known locally as Earth. Krath's voice resonated through bone and metal alike. You stand accused of violations against the Galactic Expansion Accords, unauthorized construction of interstellar vessels, transmission of unregulated electromagnetic signals across sacred space frequencies, and most serious of all, expansion beyond your designated quarantine zone without council approval. Mitchell stood perfectly still, his simple black diplomatic uniform making him appear tiny and insignificant among the cosmic grandeur surrounding him. The other alien ambassadors watched from their platforms with expressions ranging from amusement to disgust. To them, humans were barely above trained animals, a primitive species that had somehow stumbled into space travel without earning the right. The evidence is overwhelming, continued Judge Vorthak, whose serpentine form coiled around a throne made of compressed starlight. Our monitoring stations have detected 17 unauthorized human vessels in the past cycle alone. Your planet continues to broadcast chaotic signals that interfere with advanced civilizations' meditation frequencies. You have shown complete disregard for the protocols that govern civilized space. A murmur of agreement rippled through the assembled representatives. The hegemony delegate, a being of pure thought contained within a geometric shell, projected waves of satisfaction that every mind in the chamber could feel. The Trilarian ambassador's 6 arms gestured dismissively, as if dealing with particularly stubborn children. The penalty for such violations is clear, Judge Krath announced. Planetary quarantine. Your world will be enclosed in an energy barrier, cutting off all access to galactic civilization. Your species will remain isolated until you demonstrate proper evolutionary development. This process typically requires between 3,000 and 7,000 of your planetary years. The chamber fell silent except for the humming of the translation nodes. Every eye, sensor, and consciousness focused on the small human figure standing alone in the center of the vast space. Mitchell should have been terrified. He should have been begging for mercy or trying to negotiate lesser penalties. Instead, he smiled. Honored judges, Mitchell said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's perfect acoustics. Before you pass sentence, I believe there's something you should see. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a device no larger than a tablet computer. Several of the nearer ambassadors leaned forward with curiosity. Human technology was considered primitive, barely worthy of notice by galactic standards. Mitchell activated the device. Instantly, the chamber's walls came alive with images, data streams, and 3-dimensional maps that made several council members recoil in shock. What they saw was impossible. Fleet positions for every major military force in the galaxy, updated in real time. Secret bases that didn't officially exist, displayed in perfect detail. Classified communication intercepts from governments that prided themselves on unbreakable security. Private conversations between council members from just hours ago, recorded with crystal clarity. The hegemony delegate's geometric form flickered with what could only be described as panic. The Trilarian ambassador's bioluminescent patches went dark with shock. Even the ancient judges seemed stunned by the scope of what they were witnessing. You see, honored judges, Mitchell continued, his smile growing wider, humanity wasn't violating your protocols out of ignorance. We've been following them very carefully. Every single one, including the ones you don't tell newcomer species about. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Translation nodes stopped humming as if uncertain how to process what they were witnessing. The floating platform seemed to lean away from Mitchell, as if proximity to him had suddenly become dangerous. For 8 years, every probe you sent to study primitive Earth carried home more than just data about our world. Every cultural exchange, every scientific cooperation, every time you allowed a human to visit your territories, you gave us another opportunity to study you. While you were debating whether to quarantine us, we were learning everything about the civilization we were supposed to join. Mitchell gestured to the displays showing impossible levels of galactic intelligence, ship movements tracked across 100 star systems, communication networks mapped to their deepest levels, military capabilities assessed with surgical precision. The question isn't whether you should quarantine Earth, Mitchell said, his voice cutting through the cosmic silence like a blade. The question is whether you can afford to make an enemy of a species that's been watching everything you do for nearly a decade. Judge Krath's crystalline form seemed to dim. This is impossible. Our security protocols are absolute. Your security protocols assume your enemies will announce themselves before they attack, Mitchell replied. They assume that primitive species will remain primitive. Most importantly, they assume that anyone smart enough to be a threat would be too proud to pretend to be harmless. The chamber erupted into chaos as representatives began shouting in hundreds of languages. Accusations flew between species as they realized the scope of the human infiltration. If humans could penetrate their networks, what else had been compromised? Who else had been watching? Through it all, Mitchell stood calmly in the center of the storm. He had delivered his message. Now the galaxy would have to decide whether they wanted humanity as an ally or an enemy. But one thing was certain. The age of underestimating the species from Earth was over. I suggest, Mitchell said, his voice somehow carrying over the chaos, that we reschedule this tribunal for a time when everyone has had a chance to review the complete intelligence files we're prepared to share. After all, you'll want to make your decision based on accurate information about what humanity actually is, rather than what you assumed we were. He deactivated his device, and the overwhelming displays vanished, leaving only the memory of impossible human capabilities burned into every alien mind present. We'll be in touch, Mitchell said, and walked back toward the crystal doors, leaving behind a chamber full of the galaxy's most powerful beings, who suddenly realized they might not be as powerful as they thought. The emergency session in the Trilarian High Command bunker began with an alarm that had not sounded in over 2 centuries. Deep beneath the capital city of Nexus Prime, military leaders from across the galaxy gathered via quantum communication links, their holographic forms flickering with barely contained panic. Admiral Zara Blackwood watched the feeds from her command center, hidden within an asteroid field at the edge of the Kepler system. Around her, banks of quantum computers processed data streams that officially didn't exist, while her staff coordinated the most ambitious intelligence operation in galactic history. The asteroid appeared dead from the outside, just another piece of space debris. Inside, it hummed with technology that made even advanced alien civilizations look primitive. Admiral, we're receiving priority transmissions from all sectors, reported Commander Tom Bradley, his fingers dancing across holographic displays that showed communication intercepts from across known space. Every major government in the galaxy is scrambling to assess their security breaches. The Trilarians are conducting emergency sweeps of their entire fleet. The Void Consortium has shut down their primary communication networks completely. Blackwood nodded grimly. Operation Shadowwatch had been humanity's greatest secret, initiated the moment their deep space arrays had detected artificial signals from beyond the solar system. While Earth's governments had publicly celebrated first contact and humanity's invitation to join galactic civilization, their military and intelligence services had been preparing for a much darker reality. Status report on our embedded assets, Blackwood commanded. All agents remain in position and undetected, replied Dr. Rachel Moore, pulling up displays that showed the true scope of human infiltration. Agent Parker is still working as a cultural liaison in the hegemony's core worlds. Agent Williams continues his assignment as a trade representative with the Celestial Assembly. Agent Rodriguez maintains her cover as an anthropology student studying Trilarian society. The scope was staggering. For 8 years, every time an alien vessel had visited Earth's solar system, they had unknowingly carried home passengers, Not stowaways in the traditional sense, but microscopic quantum transmitters that burrowed into their systems like digital parasites. Each probe sent to study primitive Earth had returned carrying the seeds of its own surveillance network. How did they miss it for so long? Bradley asked, studying the tactical displays that showed red dots marking compromised alien systems across half the galaxy. Because they were looking for threats that matched their own technological paradigms. Moore explained. They scanned for energy weapons, faster-than-light drives, and quantum shields. They never thought to look for threats. Disguised as primitive radio signals or hidden in the molecular structure of simple gifts exchanged during cultural visits, Blackwood brought up the master timeline showing humanity's careful infiltration strategy. Phase 1 had been observation, learning everything they could about galactic civilization while appearing harmless. Phase 2 had been insertion, placing human agents and technology throughout alien space under the guise of cultural and scientific exchange. Phase 3, which had just begun, was demonstration. The beautiful irony, Blackwood continued, is that they helped us build the entire network. Every time they invited a human delegation to visit their worlds, they gave us another insertion point. Every technological demonstration they provided taught us their capabilities and limitations. Every security protocol they showed us revealed exactly what they were protecting against. The displays showed the true extent of human expansion, hidden colonies on 12 worlds, manufacturing facilities built inside dead stars, research stations anchored in the dark matter streams between galaxies, all of it invisible to alien sensors, all of it waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Admiral, we're receiving the activation signal from Ambassador Mitchell, reported a communication specialist. Operation Revelation is green. All cells are standing by for Phase 4. Blackwood studied the galactic map one final time. Red dots marked every alien system they had penetrated. Blue dots showed human installations that didn't officially exist. Green lines traced communication networks they had compromised. Yellow markers indicated key alien leaders who were unknowingly surrounded by human agents. 8 years of preparation, she said quietly. 8 years of letting them think they were the teachers and we were the students. 8 years of careful positioning while they debated whether primitive humans deserved to join their civilization. Phase 4. Authorization? Bradley asked. Authorized, Blackwood confirmed. Show them what happens when you underestimate a species that's been planning for war since before they knew war was necessary. Across the galaxy, systems that had operated flawlessly for millennia began experiencing coordinated anomalies. Nothing destructive, nothing that couldn't be explained as random technical failures. Traffic control networks developed routing errors that sent cargo ships on extended scenic tours. Banking systems started calculating interest in decimal instead of their traditional mathematical systems. Entertainment networks began playing human classical music during prime alien meditation hours. On Trilarian Prime, the military command bunker's displays flickered and briefly showed Earth's flag before returning to normal. On Hegemony Core Worlds, public announcement systems played a 5-second audio clip of human laughter. In Void Consortium space, their quantum meditation frequencies suddenly carried the faint echo of human voices saying, "Hello." The message was clear and terrifying in its implications. We could have done so much worse. We still can. Admiral, Moore reported. We're detecting emergency communications across all major alien networks. Military leaders are demanding explanations their technicians can't provide. Some are accusing each other of cyber warfare. The Trilarian Admiral has just accused the hegemony of infiltration attacks. Perfect, Blackwood replied. Nothing destroys alliance trust faster than the suspicion that your allies might be your enemies. Let them argue among themselves while they try to figure out how a primitive species accomplished what their greatest enemies couldn't manage in centuries of trying. The command center's main display showed a real-time map of galactic communication traffic. Emergency signals flashed between homeworlds like a constellation of panic. Military fleets were being recalled to defend capitals that might already be compromised. Trade networks ground to a halt as governments implemented security lockdowns. Phase 5 preparations? Bradley inquired. Begin positioning our deep strike assets, Blackwood ordered. If the Council decides to move against Earth despite our demonstration, they need to understand that quarantining one world won't solve their problem. We stopped being confined to Earth the day we learned we weren't alone in the universe. In the depths of space, Ships that had been masquerading as derelict hulks began powering up their true systems. On alien worlds, sleeper agents checked weapons that didn't officially exist. Hidden manufacturing facilities started producing devices whose capabilities would rewrite the balance of galactic power. Admiral, the communications specialist announced. Priority message from Ambassador Mitchell. The Council has agreed to reconvene in 72 hours for reconsideration of humanity's status. Then we have 72 hours to prepare for either diplomacy or war, Blackwood replied. Make sure they understand that either way, they're no longer dealing with primitive humans who just discovered space travel. They're negotiating with a species that's been watching them plan our destruction for 8 years. The galaxy was about to learn that when humans said they came in peace, it was because they had already won the war. The private quantum communication chamber of Judge Krath had been designed to be the most secure location in the known galaxy. Crystalline walls that could withstand stellar radiation were lined with quantum scramblers that made eavesdropping theoretically impossible. Energy barriers that required the power output of small stars maintained absolute isolation from the outside universe. For 3,000 years, the chamber had been impenetrable. Now alarms shrieked as security protocols reported breach after breach, each attempt to trace the intrusions leading to the same impossible conclusion. The attacks were coming from inside the quantum barriers themselves. This cannot be happening. Krath's voice resonated with harmonics of distress that made nearby crystals crack. Our security measures were developed by the greatest minds in galactic history. The mathematical principles alone would require computational resources exceeding the energy budget of entire star systems. The chamber's holographic displays activated without authorization. A human face appeared, unremarkable except for eyes that held depths of calculation that made ancient galactic scholars seem naive. The man appeared to be in his 50s, with graying hair and the patient expression of someone who had been planning this conversation for years. Judge Krath, the human said in perfect Trilarian ceremonial dialect, his pronunciation flawless despite the fact that no human should have been capable of producing the required harmonic frequencies. My name is Dr. Alan Foster. I believe it's time we had an honest conversation. Impossible, Krath hissed, his crystalline form refracting light in patterns of shock. This communication channel operates on frequencies unknown to your species. The harmonic mathematics required to generate proper Trilarian speech patterns are beyond primitive vocal capabilities. Foster's smile carried no warmth. Judge, we've been listening to your private conversations for 3 years. Did you really think that talented linguist you invited to your Cultural Sciences Academy was actually there to study Trilarian poetry? Dr. Susan Hayes spent 8 months in your universities, not admiring your literature, but mapping your communication protocols and learning to mimic your biological acoustics. As if responding to his words, files began materializing around Krath's chamber. Personal communications between council members discussing humanity's fate. Private assessments of human capabilities that had influenced the decision to pursue quarantine. Most damaging of all, recordings of conversations where council members had laughed about the primitive species that thought it could join galactic civilization. You evaluated our species based on deliberately incomplete data, Foster continued. Every test you administered, every capability assessment you conducted measured our ability to replicate technologies and solve problems you had already mastered. You weren't testing our intelligence, Judge. You were testing our willingness to be good students. The holographic display expanded, showing surveillance footage from across Trilarian space. Human faces appeared in locations they had no authorization to access. A human woman working in the Council's Strategic Planning Division. A human man serving as a translator for classified military briefings. Even a human teenager who had supposedly won a cultural exchange scholarship, now revealed to be carefully positioned in the judge's own household staff. Every interaction your people had with mine was an intelligence-gathering opportunity, Foster explained as Krath watched his private world dissolve before his eyes. Every demonstration of your technology taught us your capabilities. Every expression of your superiority revealed your assumptions. Every time you dismissed us as primitive, you gave us another advantage in preparing for this moment. Krath's mind reeled as he recognized face after face. The cultural anthropologist who had spent months studying Trilarian social structures. The engineering student who had seemed so eager to learn about their manufacturing processes. The artist whose primitive sculptures had somehow gained access to the highest levels of Trilarian society, including dinner parties in Krath's own residence, Dr. Hayes, Foster said, and the display showed a human woman in Trilarian academic robes, standing in what was unmistakably Krath's private library. Linguistics specialist, fluent in 47 languages, including 12 that your own people consider extinct. While you were teaching her about Trilarian cultural evolution, she was learning to perfectly mimic your quantum communication frequencies. The implications were staggering. If humans could penetrate Trilarian security at the deepest levels, what about the other council races? The display shifted to show similar scenes across the galaxy. Human agents embedded in hegemony core worlds, Void Consortium strategic facilities, and Celestial Assembly meditation centers. Agent Morrison, Foster indicated a human man in the quantum laboratories of the hegemony. Theoretical physicist specializing in consciousness-based computing. The hegemony believed they were teaching him basic thought manipulation techniques. Actually, he was learning to interface directly with their central processing cores. Agent Chen, he continued, highlighting a human woman in Void Consortium space. Combat veteran trained in psychological warfare. The consortium thought they were healing her battle trauma through their meditation techniques. In reality, she was learning to navigate their mental communication networks. What do you want? Krath finally managed to ask, his voice carrying harmonics of defeat that resonated through the crystal chamber. Justice, Foster replied simply. Your council convened to judge humanity based on species prejudice and incomplete intelligence. You made decisions about our fate while actively preventing us from demonstrating our true capabilities. Now you'll make those decisions with complete information. The displays filled with real-time intelligence data flowing from across the galaxy. Fleet movements tracked in perfect detail. Resource allocation patterns mapped to their source. Communication intercepts revealing the private fears and plans of every major galactic power. Every military asset you control, every trade agreement you depend upon, every alliance that maintains your power, Foster continued. All of it is now transparent to human intelligence. We know about the secret weapons testing in the hegemony core worlds. We know about the Trilarian plans to annex the Outer Rim colonies. We know about the Void Consortium's manipulation of galactic food markets. Krath's crystalline form seemed to dim as the scope of human knowledge became clear. They hadn't just infiltrated galactic civilization. They had dissected it, understood it, and positioned themselves to influence it in ways that made traditional military conquest seem primitive. You have 72 hours to convince your fellow council members to reconsider their position, Foster concluded. After that, this intelligence becomes available to every species in the galaxy. Your enemies will be very interested to learn about the weaknesses in your defensive systems, the actual locations of your hidden facilities, and the real reasons behind your manipulation of interstellar markets. The connection began to fade, but Foster's voice remained clear. The age of making decisions about humanity without consulting humanity is over, Judge. The question now is whether you want us as allies who help you maintain galactic stability, or as enemies who sell your secrets to the highest bidder. The displays vanished, leaving Krath alone with the horrifying realization that the greatest strategic minds in galactic history had been outmaneuvered by a species they had dismissed as barely worthy of notice. In trying to contain humanity, they had instead taught them everything they needed to know to tear galactic civilization apart, and the humans had been polite enough to ask for permission before they did it. The Void Consortium's high temple floated in the space between stars, a massive structure of crystallized thought and metallic prayer that served as the spiritual center for 17 billion consciousness-based life forms. Within its most sacred chamber, the consortium's leadership had gathered for emergency meditation, seeking cosmic guidance for the crisis that threatened to destroy everything they had built. The meditation was interrupted by something that should have been impossible. Laughter, Elder Mindweaver. Synthara's consciousness recoiled as foreign thoughts invaded the sacred space. Human thoughts warm and amused and completely unauthorized. Around the meditation circle, other elders emerged from their trance states in confusion and growing alarm. The barriers are intact, whispered Thoughtkeeper Morvan, his mental voice carrying harmonics of terror. The quantum meditation fields show no signs of penetration. Yet there are human minds in our most protected space. The laughter faded, replaced by a single human voice that somehow spoke directly into their consciousness, without triggering any of their mental defenses. The voice belonged to a woman, and it carried the distinctive mental signature of someone who had spent years learning to think in ways that bypassed their security protocols. "Honored elders," the voice said, "my name is Agent Lisa Parker. I apologize for interrupting your meditation, but I thought you should know that your sacred frequencies have been carrying human voices for the past 6 months." The assembled elders' minds reeled as they realized the implications. Their meditation networks formed the backbone of consortium communication, linking billions of consciousness-based beings across hundreds of star systems. If humans had penetrated those networks, they had access to every private thought, every strategic discussion, every secret plan shared among consortium leadership. "Impossible," Elder Synthara projected, his mental voice fragmenting with shock. "Our consciousness barriers were developed by beings who had achieved pure thought before your species learned to make fire. The complexity of penetrating mental constructs without triggering defensive responses requires computational capabilities that exceed the processing power of entire worlds." Parker's mental presence somehow conveyed the impression of a smile. "Elder, you taught me those defensive techniques yourself. Do you remember the human psychology researcher you invited to study consortium meditation practices, Dr. Lisa Parker, whose research into combat trauma treatment so impressed your healing masters?" Files began materializing in the shared mental space, each one a violation of everything the consortium believed about mental security. Private conversations between elders discussing humanity's quarantine, strategic assessments of human psychological weaknesses that could be exploited, plans for using consciousness manipulation to control human development if they proved problematic. "You've been inside our minds," Morvan whispered, his thoughts carrying waves of violation and horror. "For months you've been listening to our most private communications." 6 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days, Parker confirmed. "Ever since your healing masters taught me to interface with your communication networks. They believed they were helping me overcome battlefield psychological trauma. Actually, I was learning to navigate consciousness-based systems without triggering your mental immune responses." The scope of the penetration became clear as more files appeared. Human agents embedded throughout consortium space, their minds now trained to interface directly with consciousness-based technology. Communication intercepts from across their territory. Even more disturbing, evidence that several key decisions made by consortium leadership had been subtly influenced by human agents working at levels they hadn't even realized existed. "Agent Morrison in the Hegemony Core worlds," Parker continued, her mental voice now accompanied by images of humans working in facilities across the galaxy. "Agent Rodriguez studying Trilarian social dynamics. Agent Kim learning celestial assembly energy manipulation techniques. Every cultural exchange, every scientific collaboration, every time you allowed humans to study your ways, you gave us another vector for understanding how to interact with your technologies." Elder Synthara's consciousness shuddered as he recognized the scope of human infiltration. They hadn't just learned alien technologies, they had learned to think like aliens, to interface with consciousness-based systems, to manipulate energy fields, and to navigate quantum communication networks using biological minds that shouldn't have been capable of such feats. "What you discovered," Parker explained, "is that human consciousness is remarkably adaptable. We might not have evolved pure thought like the consortium, or crystalline logic like the Trilarians, or energy manipulation like the Celestial Assembly. But we can learn to mimic all of those thought patterns well enough to fool your security systems." The meditation chamber's walls began displaying real-time intelligence feeds from across consortium space. Military installations revealed in perfect detail, secret research projects exposed, private communications between consortium leaders and their allies, all recorded and cataloged with disturbing precision. "The irony," Parker continued, "is that you helped us become the perfect infiltrators. By insisting that we prove ourselves worthy of galactic civilization, you taught us exactly what capabilities we needed to develop. By testing our intelligence against your own achievements, you showed us the boundaries we needed to cross. By dismissing us as primitive, you ensured we had all the time we needed to prepare." Thoughtkeeper Morvan's mental voice carried desperate hope. "You cannot maintain this level of infiltration indefinitely. The quantum consciousness barriers will eventually adapt to exclude your interference patterns." Parker's mental laughter echoed through the sacred space. Elder, we're not interfering with your consciousness barriers. We're thinking inside them. Every human agent you're detecting has been trained to process thoughts in patterns that your systems recognize as legitimate, consortium mental activity. As far as your barriers know, we belong here. The implications were terrifying. If humans could perfectly mimic consortium thought patterns, they could access any system, join any communication, influence any decision. The barriers that protected consortium civilization from mental intrusion had become highways for human intelligence operations. Your council has 72 hours to reconsider humanity's status, Parker announced. During that time, you might want to review your own security protocols. Because every strategic plan you make, every military decision you consider, every alliance you negotiate, will be known to human intelligence before your own field commanders receive their orders. The files vanishing from the shared mental space, but their implications remained. The consortium's greatest advantage, their consciousness-based technology, had become their greatest vulnerability. A species they had dismissed as mentally primitive had learned to outthink them using their own techniques. The question, Parker concluded, is whether you want humanity as allies who help protect your mental networks from real threats, or as enemies who sell access to your consciousness barriers to species that haven't been as polite as we have been. Her presence faded from the meditation chamber, leaving the elders alone with the knowledge that their most sacred spaces were no longer secure. In trying to test humanity's worthiness, they had instead taught them everything they needed to know to control the very foundations of consortium power, and the humans had been courteous enough to announce themselves before they took over completely. The reconvened Galactic Council session bore no resemblance to the confident tribunal that had met just 72 hours earlier. Where once there had been cosmic authority and species supremacy, now nervous energy filled the vast chamber as representatives cast suspicious glances at monitoring devices they suddenly realized might not be entirely secure. The floating platform seemed dimmer, their occupants huddled in clusters of worried conversation. Ambassador James Mitchell walked through the crystal doors once again, but everything had changed. He was no longer a defendant awaiting judgment from his betters. He was a negotiator holding cards that no one had realized existed, representing a species that had rewritten the rules of galactic power while pretending to play by the old ones. The chair recognizes the human delegation, announced Judge Krath, his crystalline voice lacking its previous dismissive authority. Around the chamber, translation nodes hummed with increased intensity, as representatives strained to understand communications that might contain hidden layers of meaning. Mitchell activated his tablet, and the chamber's displays filled with a new image that made several alien representatives recoil in shock. Earth hung in space, but not as the isolated blue marble they remembered from their files. Orbital installations surrounded the planet like a mechanical constellation, their designs clearly incorporating technology that surpassed anything in their databases. The installations were massive, obviously advanced, and clearly had been hidden from galactic observation for years. Honored council members, Mitchell began, 72 hours ago you convened to judge humanity for violating containment protocols designed for primitive species. Today I'm here to propose a new relationship based on complete information rather than convenient assumptions. The displays shifted, showing star maps that marked dozens of human settlements across previously unexplored space. Each installation was obviously sophisticated, clearly established, and had been operating while the Council debated humanity's fitness for civilization. The scope was breathtaking and terrifying in its implications. The quarantine you proposed would have enclosed Earth in an energy barrier, cutting us off from galactic civilization. But Earth was never our only world. While you debated our fate, humanity had already expanded beyond your ability to contain us. We stopped being a single-planet species the day we learned we weren't alone in the universe. Judge Vorthak's serpentine form coiled tighter around his throne. You have systematically deceived this council, violated first contact protocols, hidden your true capabilities while accepting the benefits of galactic civilization. Mitchell's expression grew serious. Honored Judge, we did exactly what any intelligent species would do when facing potential extinction. We prepared. When our deep space arrays detected your civilization, our strategic analysis suggested a 78% probability that honest first contact would result in subjugation, exploitation, or elimination of human independence. So we chose survival over honesty. The chamber fell silent as the implications settled. Every species present had achieved their galactic status through conquest, absorption, or alliance with more powerful neighbors. None had faced a potential threat that had spent decades preparing for their arrival while maintaining perfect operational security. "What are your terms?" asked the Celestial Assembly representative, a being of pure energy whose form flickered with barely controlled anxiety. Mitchell smiled, but it was the expression of a strategic master who had achieved victory through moves his opponents hadn't seen coming. "Humanity requests full council membership with voting rights proportional to our actual territorial holdings and technological capabilities. In exchange, we offer 3 things that will fundamentally change galactic civilization." He paused, letting the tension build as representatives leaned forward despite themselves. "First, our surveillance network transitions from intelligence gathering to cooperative security. We continue monitoring potential threats, but we share that information with council members, instead of using it against them. Every species here gains access to intelligence capabilities that exceed anything you've developed independently." Several representatives exchanged glances of barely concealed hunger. The intelligence advantages humanity had demonstrated could revolutionize their own strategic positions. Second, our advanced infiltration techniques become available for joint operations against external threats. The same capabilities we use to penetrate your networks can be directed against hostile forces approaching from outside known space. Your enemies will face opposition they cannot detect until it's too late. "External threats?" Judge Mordith inquired, his voice carrying new respect for the human representative. Mitchell's expression grew grave. "Which brings me to our third offering. While you've been focused on managing internal galactic politics, our deep space monitoring networks have detected something approaching from the galactic rim. Multiple large-scale energy signatures, artificial in origin, moving in coordinated patterns toward inhabited space. Our analysis suggests first contact in approximately 14 months. The chamber erupted in controlled chaos as representatives demanded details. Mitchell waited for the commotion to subside before continuing. "Whatever is coming toward us makes our infiltration of your networks look like a training exercise. The energy signatures alone suggest technological capabilities that exceed anything in your historical records. They're approaching from 3 different vectors, suggesting coordinated strategy rather than random exploration." He reactivated his tablet, and the displays showed long-range sensor data that made the assembled aliens fall silent with shock. The approaching signatures were massive, clearly artificial, and obviously represented a technological capability that dwarfed anything galactic civilization had achieved. "The choice is simple," Mitchell concluded. "Accept humanity as an equal partner in galactic defense, with full access to the intelligence networks we've spent 8 years building, or face the approaching threat with security systems that have holes you cannot see and defensive capabilities you do not understand." The silence stretched as council members processed the implications. They could maintain their pride and face an unknown threat with compromised systems, or they could accept that the primitive species they had planned to quarantine was actually their best hope for survival. "Either way," Mitchell added quietly, "the age of underestimating Earth is over. The question now is whether you want us as allies who help you survive what's coming, or as neighbors who watch from a safe distance while you discover why we spent so much time learning to hide." Judge Krath's crystalline form seemed to pulse with resignation. "The council will deliberate on humanity's proposal." Mitchell deactivated his tablet and prepared to leave. "Take your time, honored judges, but remember that whatever is approaching from the rim won't wait for your deliberations to conclude, and they probably won't be as polite as we've been about announcing their intentions." As he walked back toward the crystal doors, Mitchell reflected on the journey that had brought humanity to this moment. They had dreamed of joining galactic civilization as eager students learning from ancient wisdom. Instead, they had arrived as teachers preparing to educate the galaxy in the art of survival. The universe, it seemed, was about to become a much more dangerous place. But for the first time in galactic history, someone had been watching and preparing for that danger long before it arrived. Behind him, the most powerful beings in known space began the difficult process of admitting they needed help from the species they had tried to quarantine just days before.